these drugs. So I know these drugs can be given safely, and I know they can be administered safely. I mean, you don't have to look at my research. You can ask Americans. Ask the guy in the White House. Ask the guy before him. Ask the guy before him. Um, if we think about even President Kennedy, he used amphetamines throughout his administration safely, and we revere him. We think that he's made a contribution. So this notion of drugs being so dangerous, it's misguided, and it's very limited, that focus.
Well, is it possible, people who are like weekend users of heroin or cocaine,
Yes.
and you say this doesn't necessarily interfere with their ambition, with their discipline, is that right? I mean, it seems to me almost counterintuitive that if someone is using such strong psychoactive drugs, that they are a fully functional member of the community.
So when we say strong psychoactive drug, one of the strongest psychoactive drugs is nicotine, but we don't make that statement that you've made, right?
Okay.
So it just requires a small amount of nicotine to have its effect. I think in every cigarette there's like 1 milligram. 1 milligram of cocaine wouldn't do anything for you. So I don't. The notion that these drugs are strong, that's a myth.
It's a myth.
That's yeah. That's
so you think that when I talk about alcohol and tobacco, that they may be more deleterious to my well-being than cocaine or heroin?
Certainly. The thing that we have to understand is that with education we can enhance the positive effects of all of these drugs, including alcohol, including cocaine, including heroin. And with education we can decrease the negative effects. So the first thing we have to understand is that yes, there are people who can use cocaine on the weekend, heroin on the weekend, and go to work and pay their taxes. The question that you asked about heroin and cocaine, just think about asking the same question for alcohol. Are there people who can drink alcohol on the weekend and then go to work on Monday and be responsible individuals? Not yes, but hell yes. The same is true with cocaine and heroin.
The same is true, even though, again, in the American public's mind, those two drugs are far more powerful.
Yes, the things that are in the American public's mind sometimes are not right. And to be nice, the public, as I said, has just been miseducated about drugs.
Well, here we are, and here's your book again. The book is called High Price, A Neuroscientist's Journey of Self-Discovery that challenges everything you know about drugs and society. Tell us, what would you say? Here you are. You have this platform on C-SPAN. What is it that we should know?
What should we're talking about what we should know. I mean, the notion that drugs, that most of the people who use drugs, for example, are addicted. Just not true. Most of the people who use drugs, they do so, they go to work. If you're going to use any drug, you should understand that you should respect the fact that they are powerful or potentially powerful psychoactive substances. If you don't use drugs with that respect, you run the risk of getting in trouble. So if you know about the effects of the drug that you're taking, then you increase the likelihood that you'll be safe.
But where do you go for such information?
Go to my book, for one. There is one of the things that when we think about the internet contains a lot of information, but there is no quality control. That's a major concern. There are other books that have been written on this subject. Like we talked about earlier, I have a textbook on this subject in which we talk mainly about the biological effects of drugs on people's behavior, on people. But those kind of books are very dry, and the public gets bored. So I think this book, High Price, is a start.
Well, just to explain again for the viewer, this book is not a textbook in any way. It's largely your personal story, and then talking about drug use in your life, and then about your research in combination. So when we're talking about drug use, for example, you mentioned, that you've done cocaine and done it over a period of time. I think you said you were doing it like twice a month with a girlfriend. But it's not the case that if you ran out of cocaine, you felt any compunction to go get more, or you were somehow unable to function because you were using cocaine. Instead, you talk about larger motivational forces in your life. Your desire to succeed educationally, your desire to earn money, your desire to have a lover. That these were other forces. So let's transfer that now to the lab.
Yes.
You're working with rats. You said in this book, you got to take rats out of this caged, isolated environment, put them in a more social environment, and then you see that they make choices about drug use that doesn't lead them to kill themselves by constantly pushing the lever. So, what you're saying to Americans is you have to see drugs as part of a normal life?
Sorry. So when we think about the lab, many of us have heard about the stories where if you allow an animal to self-administer a drug like cocaine, they will do so until they kill themselves. Many of us have heard that. But what we don't hear is that those rats or those animals were so isolated. The only thing that they could do was take cocaine. And certainly, if your life consisted of you being in this cage and the only thing available is cocaine, that's what you will do. Now, if you put another animal in the cage, for example, an animal of the opposite sex, cocaine is no longer as attractive. If you put sweet water in that cage, cocaine is no longer attractive. If you put a running wheel in that cage, cocaine is no longer attractive. So when we have these alternatives in our lives, and many of us do, it decreases the impact or the attractiveness of cocaine or other drugs. And we know this as parents, as citizens. We all know this. If we have jobs, we know that we have to go to our jobs in order to get the respect, the regard, and all the rest of these things. Because if we don't, then we have nothing. And so sometimes drug use interferes with your ability to do your job, to get this positive regard and these sorts of things.